If you're starting a podcast for your business this year, then I'm going to help you with this easy step-by-step breakdown. Now, of course, my name is LaShonda Smith, and I'm a content creator and content strategist, and I got you when it comes to all things YouTube and podcasting. So let's go ahead and hop right into the nitty-gritty. The first thing you need to do is go ahead and start brainstorming the details about your podcast. So you really need to create a plan for your short-term goals as well as your long-term goals. So just because you're starting out in one way with your podcast, you want to also make sure that you are creating a plan of execution when it comes to the overall goal for your podcast. A couple other things that you want to consider is if you plan on starting this with video podcasting or just starting out with audio only podcasting. I feel that this is the one that really trips people up because we see a lot of podcasters are now starting to create a video podcast to help gain visibility for their podcast. So you may be wondering like, dang, should I start this video podcast or should I start with audio? And I am going to do an additional video kind of breaking down the difference and how to kind of choose whether you should start with an audio or video podcast. But just in short, you want to start with something that's going to feel the easiest for you. And an even better way to kind of decide is if you already have a YouTube channel, for instance, maybe doing an audio only podcast could be a better option because you're already giving your audience video options to kind of consume content from you. So you don't necessarily have to do two different YouTube channels, one with your podcast and one with your YouTube, like your main YouTube channel. But it's completely up to you based on what your short-term and long-term goals are for your podcast. During this brainstorm session, you also want to kind of pick a name for your podcast and pick a name that is based on what the podcast is going to be about. So this is a great example when it comes to what your niche is in, what industry are you creating this podcast for. You kind of want something that is kind of to the point. And if you don't have a big personal brand just yet, you might not want to name your podcast just your name. So like LaShonda Smith, the LaShonda Smith Show, for example, because whenever people organically come across your podcast, especially if it's audio only, then nobody really knows you by your personal name yet. So you want to kind of establish your audience first before you do a podcast solely with your name. You want to create a name that is easy to pop up in search so that if anyone is looking for podcasts in the niche or category that you're in, your podcast will come up organically and kind of drive organic listeners to your new podcast. I feel like I'm going to say podcast a lot in this video, but hey, just stick with me, okay? You also want to have an understanding of how you plan to monetize this podcast. This can also kind of help you determine if you want to do video or audio only as well. Now, you can get sponsorships for both, but what I always recommend for new podcasters is to monetize using your business primarily. So if you have signature offers already, maybe you have digital products or whatever your services and offers are, create a monetization plan so that way you know as you're building out your podcast, you're also going to start driving sales and revenue into your business through this podcast. Because when you think about it, you're really nurturing your audience through this audio experience and you're creating that intimate experience for them to build that know, like, and trust factor with you. And so what better way to monetize this than to promote your own offers? But again, keep in mind that there are other opportunities like brand deals, sponsorships, and things of that nature that you can add as a revenue source on your podcast if that's what you choose to do. A really good option is if you are planning on doing a video podcast, for example. On YouTube, you'll get ad revenue, and then your sponsorships, you can kind of double up on having sponsorships for audio and both video as well. So just keep those things in mind when you are doing your brainstorming. And then the last thing in the brainstorming section is you want to have a launch date. So normally what I try to do is launch at the beginning of a quarter. So that way you're starting off fresh. A lot of people tend to launch at the beginning of a new year. Just keep in mind what your launch date is going to be. It's going to take you probably around 30 days, maybe even 60 days, depending on if you have additional help to actually start and launch your podcast. So definitely keep that in mind. Now we're going to move on to purchasing your equipment. So the very basics of what you need for podcasting is going to be a podcast mic, Okay. And if you're doing video, then obviously you need to have some type of camera, whether it's with your phone or if you're purchasing a professional camera, tripods, a ring light. Like in this video, I'm using a ring light right now, but you want to kind of have an idea of what you want to purchase. I have this podcast mic on a mic stand, and I actually have a whole video in reference to all the equipment that you need to purchase, and I will make sure to link that. I always forget. It's either going to be up here or on this side, but I'll make sure to link it so that way you can check out that video in case you need specifics for what type of mic you want to purchase, what type of stand you need, and all those things is going to be in that video. Now, when it comes to recording your actual podcast, I don't know if you can see, but right here on my computer, I'm actually recording this podcast style on my computer using software called Audacity. So I would strongly suggest you download Audacity. It is a free software that you would download to your computer, and that's how you would start to record your podcast through a mic like this one. It's really, really easy to set up, and you're definitely going to need some type of source to get your audio recorded for that. Now, another alternative that you can do, if let's say, for example, you don't have a computer, then what you can also do is, as long as you have the proper cord like this, where it's USB compatible, or is it USB-C? Thing is USB-C compatible. There are some mics like this one, for example. This is what is the name of this mic? This mic is called Fifine, and you can actually plug this mic up directly into your phone. So one of the things that you could do, if you have a phone that's compatible, which is basically like one of the newer phones, you can plug this mic straight into your phone and record your audio from that. You really just have all the options available. Another thing that you can do as well when it comes to recording your audio is you can use your voice memo app on your phone. Again, plug this mic up, and now you have a professional recording setup, and then you'll just have to export your files and things like that. So I'm trying to give you options if you're on the budget, or if you also want to use your different resources. Like if you do have a computer, it's going to be easier to do it through your computer, just a heads up, but you want to have all those things in place. If you are planning to record a podcast with a co-host, so let's say, for example, both of you guys are going to be in the same place and it's going to be audio only, or maybe it's going to be video, you're definitely going to need a software called Voicemeeter. So I found this out recently when me and my fiance started our couples podcast, that you can't just use Audacity and have two mics attached to the Audacity software. So what we ended up needing to do is downloading a software called the Voicemeeter, and it allows you to attach, I want to say, up to 4 different mics at one time, and then you would use Voicemeeter as your mic on Audacity, and then now all of your audio is in sync. I don't know if I'm getting really tech savvy on here. If you need me to do a completely different video kind of going into more detail, just drop it in the comments below, but I'm trying to keep it simple so that way you guys understand that you need these different softwares. Again, I'm also going to put all of the links in the description box so that way you could just click what I'm talking about, whether it's Audacity, Voicemeeter, and then just download that stuff as you're starting your podcast. All right, so now you've brainstormed, you've purchased your equipment. Now it's time to practice and prepare to record your content. So I cannot recommend enough that you practice your podcast before you go recording your official first episode. If you are not used to creating content like this, and I can tell you right now, the first time you record, you want to kind of get those loose jitters out. You also want to do this because this is going to help you determine if you want to move forward with the audio only podcast or the video podcast. I'm going to tell you right now, I have done both. And for me personally, I prefer doing the audio only podcasting only because it's a more intimate experience. I ain't got to throw my wig on. I don't have to worry about presentation or production. I can literally just pull up my mic, record my audio podcast, and I can pump out multiple in one sitting when I don't have to worry about the video element. So what I would recommend you do is practice in both ways and just ramble, like just talk, make up some stuff and be like, hey, this is our podcast, da 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 da, and just talk and see which one feels the most natural to you, and also see which one feels the easiest for you to stick with and be consistent in that format. That will kind of help you determine what what you want to move forward with. So after you've done your practice, now you want to go ahead and create your intro. Some people don't even have an intro for their podcast. This is really your preference. If you want to have a 15-second voice intro, maybe have some instrumental music behind it before you actually go into your podcast, or if you want to just start right on out with the episode, it's completely up to you. But what I recommend, if you are going to have an intro, pre-record that first, so that way you can just export your intro for all of your future episodes, and you can just add it to the beginning and then flow into the episode. I feel like I'm getting real techie. But we gonna keep rolling with it. If you have questions, just drop them in the comments. Once you have your intro created, now you can start recording your first set of episodes. I recommend that you launch with at least 4 episodes. You want to launch with your trailer episode, and you definitely want to have additional episode live before you ever launch it to the public. The reason for this is because you want to provide value at the very beginning stages. Typically, the trailer is only about a couple minutes, you just explaining what the podcast is about, and then you want to move right into the meat of your podcast in an additional episode. So that way you already have some value in reference to you building your authority in the space and giving your people what they want. But you also want to have 2 additional episodes scheduled out, so that way now you have episodes going out, and then behind the scenes you can start batch recording additional content, and you'll always be ahead of the game versus you having to pick up your mic every single week and try to make sure you get your stuff out on time. Trust me when I say it sounds easier than it is. It's better to just batch record these dang on episodes, okay? During this stage, you also want to be working with a designer or starting the process of creating your cover. If you are a designer, then go you. I know I personally design my own podcast covers, but if you know that you are not a designer and you ain't got it, okay? Start working with a designer so that way you can have your cover created. There's so many options available. Whether you get a template off of Etsy, they have podcast cover templates on Etsy. You can also work with some designers on Fiverr if you're on a budget. Maybe you know graphic designers in your network. Get with someone so that you can get your cover created, because you're going to need your cover in order to do the next step. The next step is the fun step. Now you're getting listed. You're going to get listed on all of the major podcasting platforms. So that's Apple, Spotify, Pandora. They used to have Google Podcasts, but Google Podcasts is no longer a thing anymore. Now it's just straight up Spotify. You also have a lot of other like secondary podcast platforms available on Buzzsprout. I want to say it's up to maybe like 15 to 20 different ones that you can actually get listed on with your podcast through Buzzsprout. And another one that people sleep on is YouTube Music. Get your podcast listed on YouTube Music, because you will drive a lot of organic viewers just from being on that platform, because a lot of people are sleeping on that platform right now, and you can get organic exposure from having your podcast available on there as well. This will also help you with getting monetized on YouTube as well, because they do count your views from the podcast that you're posting on YouTube under YouTube Music. So that's just a little quick tip right there. Get on YouTube Music, okay? In reference to getting listed, like I said, I personally use Buzzsprout. I would recommend you use Buzzsprout. It is so seamless. It is so easy to use, because all of the platforms that you would want to get listed on, they're going to give you a step-by-step breakdown on how to get listed on there, and everything is in one place. Another reason why I like Buzzsprout is because all of your stats are available on there. You can see what your average downloads are, as well as which episodes are the most popular. It just gives you so many details in reference to the stats of your podcast. And like I said, everything is all in one place. So you can see all of the links to everything that you're listed under. You can get access directly into Apple Podcasts and any other platform. And it gives you your own podcast like website, almost sorta. So you can actually utilize your link. You can customize your link and have that accessible for your audience. And it shows all of the different platforms that they can listen on. It's just really, really seamless. So definitely use that platform. As far as getting listed, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to get listed on all of the platforms. This is why I recommend have your launch date at least 30 days out from the date that you are starting this process, because it's going to take you, especially on Apple Podcasts, it's going to take you a good 2 to 3 weeks to officially show up on Apple Podcasts when you go through that process. And after you get listed, now it's time to launch. You can launch whenever you're ready. I have some people that go ahead and just get all their stuff set up, get their first few episodes up, and then they kind of wait until the next quarter or whenever they plan on launching, and they kind of warm up their audience to the fact that they have a podcast coming out. You can really do it at your discretion, but for the most part, that's all you need to do. So that's the breakdown for starting your podcast. I hope that this was helpful for you guys. I know that you probably have more questions in reference to these different steps. So again, make sure you just leave them in the comments. But I also have something for you. If you've made it this far in the video, then I want to invite you to my new community. It's called the Create Her Legacy community, and it is perfect for you if you are starting your podcast, because this community is for women entrepreneurs who are pursuing YouTube and podcasting. I have tons of resources available in this community, and it's free. First of all, it's free, girl. So go ahead and sign up. We have a Facebook group as well as virtual events that we do on a reoccurring basis. Again, this is brand new, so I would love for you to be one of the first members in here so that you can get some exclusive offers and discounts once I do start adding other elements to this community. But definitely make sure you join there. And that way, if you need additional assistance in reference to getting your podcast started, you can drop your questions in that Facebook group and I will help you out. You'll get that mentorship that you need during this process. So I'm going to wrap it up right here. Again, I hope this was helpful for you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.